Right.
Oh.
Okay. So, okay, let's start with this one because I think it might be an interesting one to start with. Uh, the context obviously is create. We're talking about the create framework, which is the idea of sparking your creativity, but also beyond that, it's kind of the idea of creating realities into the world, unseen ideas, visions, dreams. How do you bring that into reality? So we're looking at some of the things that might get in our way for that. So that's kind of what today's going to be looking at. So I'll put this piece in and then I'll read it out. This one is called anxiety. The anxiety of imperfection. What a notion to aspire perfection, to avoid falling short of a mark we can't agree on. On the assumption is what we're here for. Missing the point, we need imperfection, the playground of maturation. Yet we keep reaching that anxiety might cease. I'll read that again, anxiety. The anxiety of imperfection. What a notion to aspire perfection, to avoid falling short of a mark we can't agree on the assumption is what we're here for. Missing the point, we need imperfection, the playground of maturation, yet we keep reaching that anxiety might cease. Hey, Muriel.
Hi, morning.
Morning,
Good
good to see
morning,
you.
morning, Muriel.
Good to see
Oh,
you,
we're
Mary.
afternoon now. we,
Oh gosh,
we've crossed noon.
I'm
That's
always,
all right.
I'm always missing something. Maybe missing the point on anxiety then.
Uh, yeah, what's coming up for people on this one? What do you hear? What's
I think immediately when I hear anxiety and all of that, it speaks to me about a deeper truth beyond what we experience. And it is this, the idea of a reality versus the reality. And you know, working with a lot of people who are going through anxiety, they will tell you that it is my reality. But there's a deeper truth where we look at what if the case is that what we've actually done is created a reality around the experience. And then when we're looking at it from that framework, then the question is this: what then is the difference between the reality versus if it's simply a reality? And if it's a reality, that means there are other realities that we can choose to experience. And I don't want to take up too much of the time. Yeah, but
no, but there is no taking up too much time in this space. It's all about what wisdom can we get from the group that would support and help people not only here but who are listening. So and what you're saying there speaks into this idea of and there's a piece to come that will actually speak into that exactly what you're talking about there. That you're right, people are experiencing anxiety because it's something that the mind itself is creating. But the mind is the one who is authoring it and also presenting it in a way that it feels like it's the only one that's there.
Yeah.
And that's where the help of support from someone else who can mirror back to you what you're presenting and open up your scope to say, okay, really, well, let's explore. Could there be others? And that is the beauty of the work of either mentoring, coaching, advising, whatever you want to call it, where people hold space for you to re-examine what feels, because I think as well when you're in something, it can feel like there's nothing else because you ruminated and really gone deep into it. It really begins to feel like it's all there is. So thanks for sharing that. Anybody else on this?
Well, I think I've been missing the point in lots of things in my life, but I'm still learning, and I'm here today to learn from all your wisdom. So thank you. I just find it very inspiring. And, there's still a lot to learn. And as we know about Revelation, the Lord reveals things every day. But I've just found out, I never played darts in my life, but somebody tells me that 60 is better than a bullseye, and I always aim for the bullseye. So I'm learning every day.
I just learned that. I didn't know that.
Well, I don't know if it's true, so just check it out. But that's what they told me, and I thought, no, you always aim for the middle, for the bullseye. But they said no, 60 is more important. So there you go.
It is true. If you get 3 in 60, that's maximum 180. It's not actually the bullseye.
There you go. What can we say?
Yeah. So it is true. But again, it's again speaking to what we're talking about, really, is what we perceive in our mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things the piece is perfect, and where this is relevant for creativity specifically, is some of the things that really stops people from being creative or giving their creative expression room to grow is the notion of perfection. And people then get anxious that if they can't be perfect, what's the point of doing it? Or having done something, they get anxious about, is this good enough? So it's this idea that actually what we call imperfection, for me, what might be imperfection for me might be someone else's perfection. And that's it's that's on the table. Is it worth stifling your creative energy, worrying about, being anxious about, is this perfect enough? Because if perfect was really a thing, we'd all be able to agree on what that perfect is. But as we all know, that's not the truth of the matter. Therefore, perfection can only be a perception at its best. And like I say, what you might be worrying about might be someone goes, perfect. And here's what's even more interesting about us as human beings. What we consider perfect can also change from moment to moment, depending on what mood or what environment or what state of mind you're found in. So to try and then create so much anxiety for yourself and suffer so much emotional turmoil on the notion of something that is not fixed or absolute may not serve us, really. I think that's kind of what's in the table. Anything else from anyone else?
I think what came back to my mind, Frank, was that how people view failure. A lot of people see it as a destination, something that has gone wrong. And I remember recently watching the story of this famous basketball player, when he kept, throughout the documentary, would always say, especially one of the time when he was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter wasn't really focusing on the many success opportunities that he had had. He was like, what about the balls that you have missed? And so his response was that there's no such thing as failure. I don't view failure that way. I actually see it as an opportunity to improve.
Steps to success.
Steps that will take me to what success looks like for me. So I think it's just how we view things. So that just brought that example to my mind. With this, because there are some parallels.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing that. You just changed the order of the poems that's coming up.
Frank, I just made a
go on.
note of striving for perfection, and I just think sometimes we spend so much time striving to be perfect. That is what generates the anxiety. But I think at the time when we're striving for this thing that we call perfection, we don't realize that we are the ones who's actually creating the anxiety within ourselves. Sometimes the anxiety, we see the anxiety as coming from outside, but really we are the ones who is creating that anxiety because we're striving for something that really is so elusive and so slippery to achieve. and has different meanings according to who's viewing it.
Exactly. Thank you very much. That's a perfect summation,
nice.
really. That's a perfect summation of
That's
what.
good. And I think if we're trying to be people pleasers, we'll always be anxious because we want to
There we
get
go.
the
That's
mark
another
quickly.
thing.
Yeah.
I love that perspective, actually. I love both those perspectives that just come on the table, because the idea that, and I think what I've always strived to help people with is, okay, we might not be able to stop this, but at least if we give you a way of determining it's going on, you can kind of go, oh, what's happening here? What perfection am I striving? Is that what's making me anxious? So that's your trigger. What's making me anxious? Then go back, step back from the mind and see what's been created there, and then go from there. And the idea that sometimes we actually, our anxiety is trying to please other people or impress other people when we talk of the context of creativity. And really, people might be impressed for a second, but ultimately, you that has created something, you should enjoy what you create. You should enjoy the process of creating it, enjoy what you create, and someone else enjoys it, that's a bonus. But you should never value someone else loving what you create more than you love it. Because I think that is the one thing you're in control of, is how you perceive what you do. And if it's come through you, then it's meant to be, is my view. Yeah, go on.
I was thinking, what if there's a notion in this conversation about failure and fear and the associated dynamics with those things. What if you can't fail at your dreams? What if you couldn't fail at your dreams? And here's what that question sits on. If you play with the idea, and I literally work with clients through this idea, what if the goals or the dreams that you're pursuing, what if you were never meant to achieve them?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. What if you were really never meant to achieve them? I say this, the goals that we're pursuing, we were never necessarily meant to achieve them. But the deeper truth is they are meant to be pursued.
I like that idea.
And there's so much in that, because life will testify of the truth that many times the goals that we're pursuing, even before we get there, once we begin the process, we realize that's not the real goal. And it's an ever-changing landscape in the dynamics of life as life continues. So if the focus is not necessarily on the end, because they were never meant to be achieved, but they were meant to be pursued, because the value sits in the pursuing, because in the pursuing, we discover so much more about who we are, how we are, why we are, and all those wonderful things.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And that speaks to the idea of it's about who you're becoming rather than what you're achieving. Yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, so I'm going to read this piece because of something that Anne-Marie said. And actually, the very example she gave was the inspiration, because I was doing a leadership development training at an organization, and we used exactly that example of a basketball player who'd had so much success, but actually he also had the most failures ever. But that's not the focus, which is why he kept going and able to achieve the success. And this is where this piece came from. This one is called Successful Failure. Failure is the label attached to an outcome we least expected. Failure is the name we give a person we think is done. Failure is the stigma we avoid at every turn that sucks out all the fun. Failure is the thief that stalks every dream, preventing some from seeing the sun. Failure is the notion we had a right to predict outcomes where no precedents exist. Failure is in need of a makeover, so it becomes a familiar friend. Failure can be seen as first attempt in learning what has never been tried. Failure can be seen as further attempts in learning, inspiring yet another try. Failure can be seen as forever acquiring important lessons, informing what to no longer try. Failure can be seen as courage to learn and not give in, the vital ingredient to success. Anybody identify with any of that?
I've often heard people saying, oh, that's doomed to fail, or something like that.
And what's your thoughts when you hear people say that?
I think it's sad that people have that thought, because, yeah, I guess it's very negative, isn't it? We need to keep hope alive and say, well, keep going, and, you know, yeah.
For me, Frank, I quite like the way that it actually started in the negative part, and we were to call it that way. It's actually one coin, but you're looking at the flip side. So one is focusing on what people perceive as a finality, as this is it, you know, there's no hope. And then when you flip the other side of the coin, you're seeing that, no, it's not the end, but it's the beginning, you know. So I think in terms of how, because the $1 million question is why some people just focus on one side of the story and other people, what is it that determines what it is that you view? And I think sometimes it's the narrative that they've heard over and over again, especially, or their dominant programming in terms of, you know, this is it, this is it, this is it. So they just don't bother to look or to examine things for themselves, but they're still operating based on that dominant negative programming that they've received.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
The idea of a negative bias, because both options, again, going back to what Ryan was saying earlier, both options exist. Is this all there is, or is there more? But if people are going back to what Muriel was saying, if you lived with someone who, before you start something, they go, oh, that's doomed to fail. Oh, that's doomed to fail. It's like eventually you become conditioned to expect that, okay, I'm going to look for failure in this rather than what could be successful. So were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say failure to me is like a double-edged sword. And I think sometimes with failure, when we try something and we don't succeed, or we fail, or we perceive ourselves as failing in achieving something, we can internalize that. And it's that internalizing that failure then makes it really personal. And then that leads us down lots of negative roads. And sometimes that is what we can't get out of. We then are stuck in a cycle of internal negative feelings about ourselves.
That is powerful reference you've just drawn there. So that you're now taking something that's perceived to have failed, and then now calling yourself a failure as a result.
Yeah.
And the pervasive outcome of that is that it now begins to invade other areas of your life. So that thing might have been in one sphere of your life. All of a sudden, all areas of your life, you begin to approach it that way. Yeah. And what's powerful about us, and the next piece probably might bring that up a bit, was that we become self-fulfilling prophecies. So we stop trying things, or we start looking for ways to find the failure in something that could succeed, because that is how we're approaching it. Wow. That is interesting. Ryan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was saying that I agree. Claudia just said, painted a very powerful picture, because it's one thing if we experience if we're observing the thing versus being the thing. And it speaks to the, for example, in the work that I do, sometimes the challenge is that people procrastinate, they put things off. And in asking them to describe themselves, they will say, I am a procrastinator. And when you're working with people as it regards to failure, most times people will say, I am a failure, you know? And it is so significant if we are able to facilitate the process where they move from the idea of I am a procrastinator to I have a habit of procrastinating.
Yeah, yeah. That's a distinction there.
Massive distinction.
And it creates the space.
Definitely. And it is so needed, that space, to step back from being the thing to observing the thing. And so in the conversation about failure and how people process their experiences, I've come to realize that if we are able to understand that at the heart of this conversation, there is a deeper reality that informs the very word failure, even as wonderfully described in the poem. Because the question then is, what is it that's informing this conversation around personal failure? What is the real fear that sits underneath it? And I would suggest that the real fear that sits underneath it, as the poem says, failure is in need of a makeover. So there is a narrative that's making a constant demand, and the demand is based on a deeper truth that you're not good enough. And so to be good enough, you need a makeover. So at the heart of the fear of failure is the narrative, the programming that we got that said to us, you're not good enough.
Yeah. And again, going back to what we were saying earlier, is that if that it's the ability to step back and see that that's what's at play.
Yeah.
And then recognize that that is not the only option that's available as a reflection. And I'm going to read this piece because I think it will lift the lid on some of that idea, and this idea of creating space between your mind. So this one is called Minds Do. It's a bit of an interesting one because of the way I've worded it, but hopefully you'll get the idea. Minds do what they do. Minds do get confused. Minds do what they do, believing to know what's best for you. Minds do what minds do. Then there it is, that part of us that sees mind doing what they do. Minds do what they do. If all you can see is mind as you, you'll be all that mind is. Minds do what they do. What is that to you? Minds do what they do. You do what you do. In sync with what minds do. Sometimes that may work for you. Other times it will not do. You see the mind do as it do, no point in fighting. That's wrong. Should say no point. No point in fighting and resisting it too. Else you be done as minds do, lost in the haze, sincere and confused. In full flight, paper tigers seen as real. Lovingly inquire, what is this to me? Minds just doing what they do, knowing yourself much more than minds do. I'll read that again because it's slightly convoluted, but there's good points in there. Minds do what they do. Minds do get confused. Minds do what they do, believing to know what's best for you. Minds do what minds do. Then there it is, that part of us that sees mind doing what they do. Minds do what they do. If all you can see is mind as you, you'll be all that mind is. Minds do what they do. What is that to you? Minds do what they do. You do what you do, in sync with what minds do. Sometimes that may work for you. Other times it will not do. You see the mind do as it do. No point in fighting and resisting it too. Else you be done as minds do, lost in the haze, sincere and confused, in full flight, paper tigers seen as real. Lovingly inquire, what is this to me? Minds just doing what they do, knowing yourself much more than minds do.
I think I'm really in love with that one.
I think I just tell my mind to mind its own business.
I like that one, you.
I love that. We jest, but that is the point, that if you create the separation that you know the mind is up to stuff, but you don't have to go along with it, that is a big part of the work.
Big part.
I mean, Frank, when you were reading it and got to the part that says, in full flight, paper tigers seem as real, I smiled, because I remembered a session that we had some time ago where this young person was saying that they took some drug and they actually had this painting on the wall of a tiger. And it was chasing them.
It jumped off the wall.
Yeah, I was chasing them. So I smiled because I remember that episode, you know, in terms of being able to differentiate what is real from what is not.
Which is actually an interesting point, because what that demonstrates is that our minds create our reality. And if there is anything happening in the mind, so the chemistry of the mind was altered, and all of a sudden something that wasn't real appeared to be real. And this is the whole thing about my work, is helping people see that, step back from your mind and understand, if this is not serving you, what is your mind creating and why is it creating it? And are you duty bound to go through with that? That is my question, really. Anything else?
Go ahead, Claudette. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the tricks of the mind, that the mind plays tricks on us. And I think sometimes it's important to sit quietly with ourselves so that we can observe and focus on what is the mind telling us, because it does play a role in our feelings, our decisions, and our actions. So I think it's important to actually spend some time sitting down and observing, where is this mind? What am I focusing on? Where is it taking me? Is it serving me? Who is it serving? Is it real?
Those are all powerful questions. And the big part of what you just said there is that creating the space to observe the mind. Now, most people don't have, I mean, for me, that was one of the biggest things that changed my life, is this idea that I'm not my mind. Yeah. I am the one who observes the mind.
There you go.
And then to use the agency to sit back and observe what's happening in the mind. And the second point in the line says, minds do get confused. That is the piece most people don't realize. They take what the mind does or see or react into as gospel. But really, when you think about it, the only reason virtual reality works is because the mind can get confused, because you feed it certain kinds of input and all of a sudden you can't tell reality from fiction. And your body starts responding as if what this virtual reality is feeding you is real. So and one of the things I suggest to people when I'm working with them on this is to actually give their mind, the voice of their mind, a name, so that they can create that space between it, to say, there goes, I remember one of my clients called it Nora. Just like, there goes Nora again. There goes bloody Nora again. Making up stuff. You know, how many things have you experienced that were not real? You know, your kid hasn't come home yet. Your mind starts going to town. Oh, they've met in an accident. And you begin to experience all those things. And then the kid walks through the door. You have just suffered for nothing.
And I think crucial to that also is if we ask a question, or if we understand motive. One of the things, dynamics in the police, where that informs the path an investigation will take, is if one can identify a motive. Because when you understand the motive, you understand the reason why. And with the mind, I think it's important if we're able to understand two things. What's the purpose of it? And when we understand the purpose of it, then we understand why it is doing what it is doing. Because Claudia said it's a trickster.
Yes, a trickster.
What are you going to say, Frank? I see you're going to say something.
Because the fourth line says, believing to know what's best for you. And I think that's what you're alluding to there.
Yes.
It actually is not something to think, if I can just get rid of this mind. No, it's there to serve us.
Yes.
But it can get confused because it's trying. Your mind's job is not to keep you happy or make you happy. Its job is to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And if it gets confused and thinks that the paper tiger is really a real tiger trying to get you, then it's going to do everything it's programmed to try and save you.
Absolutely.
The only problem is there's nothing to save you from because it's confused. So that's why your seat of the observer is there, almost like a referee to say, nah, you got that wrong, mind. We're safe. Okay, right now. We don't need to deploy that particular mechanism.
Yeah, because it is still on the, as you said, that the mind isn't there designed, created for joy. It's there for safety. So it's actually there for survival. And because it's there for survival, it is constantly scanning our experiences and environments for what it perceives as threat. And the neuroscientists will say, the psychologists will say, you know, the forefathers, the threat of the tigers and the woolly mammoth and whatever what is in the environment. But now those things no longer exist. But the threat now is being embarrassed. The threat now, is not.
Which goes back to the original place we started. What stifles creativity? The mind is trying to save you from being embarrassed because it's not perfect. Therefore, why bother, or don't do it, or what they're going to think and whatever. Because that's now its concern, is how you're perceived socially.
Absolutely. So it perceives the threat in those modern day 2024 forms. So when we understand what it's after, what its purpose is, then we can have a really informed conversation and say, hold on, even if I don't pass the exam, will the sun stop shining? And I think what Claudette was saying is this idea of not simply just going along on autopilot and believing and responding, but literally even becoming a detective. Scientist, and ask the questions, you know.
What's really going on here? What's happening? I like that. So I'm going to put this one in just so we can go back over the piece on failure and finish the makeover for it. This one is called Success Is. Success is experiencing discomfort because you have touched a reality. Success is opening your heart and feeling something deep within. Success is being more aware of what is good and what could be better. Success is aspiring to be better, more accurately informed by experience. Success is a decision to work on you and model a better way of being. Success is a process, not an end state.
I mean, this also brought to mind a conversation I had with Ryan earlier, Frank, where we were looking at some headings or titles, and one of them included the gateway to greatness. He was saying that for some people with the right mindset, they would want to know more, but for some people, they're content with just where they are. They don't want no promotion on the job. They don't want anything because of how they view it. So greatness is
allergic.
They're allergic to what they define greatness as. So I think it's a similar thing with success. You know, different people see something unattainable or success, what they call the greatness gap, where it's just for some people, not for people like myself, you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for sharing that, because part of the point of the piece really was to draw us into a reassessment of what we call success.
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you said, Anne-Marie. I think that's so true. I see success as open to various interpretations. And I think how we perceive what success is depends on our personal experiences of growing up. I think sometimes things that happen to us when we are children, those things can have a big influence on what we think is successful and what we go after in life.
Yeah. And part of the point here is really to make success open to everybody, so everybody can find themselves in the definition of success. Anything from you, Muriel, on this one?
Well, I'm just thinking that feeling something deep within, and you know, success to people, as we have said, is different. But I think you have to question yourself, what are your motives in actually getting this success, and where would that go to? The gateway to success and to greatness, well, it's different for each individual. And even when you were reading that poem about minds, the more you read, I got more confused, because minds do get confused. But you know, I think to myself, all I could think of was, we're okay. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. And Claudette said, sit quiet. And I thought, that's what we need to do, and be still and know that I am God. So all these things were going through my mind, because I'm not going to let it domineer me or spoil my success.
So that's the object lesson in everything we've discussed so far. Perfectly phrased, Muriel. Thank you so much.
Wow.
So the thing about success in this area as well is that there is an element to which success might be something we're going for, but I also want to offer us the framing of success being an opportunity presented to us by life itself, universe, God, whatever you want to call it. So the idea of experiencing a discomfort because you touched a reality might seem like, how can that be success? But actually, if your story so far has been that you're closed off, and you've built these walls so you don't feel anymore, because at a point in time where you felt so much, it was so painful. For you, the moment you're actually able to feel and experience that discomfort because you've touched the reality, for you is success. Because that's somewhere you've been blocked from really experiencing life. The idea of opening up your heart and feeling something deep within is, again, around the same thing of, actually, for you to begin to experience life and go into the next phase of life and to hold space for other people in life, it's important that your heart is open, because if your heart is closed, how are you relating and working with and treating other people? So for you, that is success. So it's just really just dipping in, and this idea of better, good, better. One thing I've had to learn recently is that it's the ability to embrace what I am achieving now, but I don't have to make myself wrong to want for it to be better. So the idea that I have to be, something has to be wrong for me to want to make it better. Do you see what I'm trying to say? But actually, I can celebrate what's happening now and recognize there's scope for it to be better, and work towards that from a place of compassion, not a place of criticism or putting myself down. Does that make sense? Anything else on this?
I think success and fear go together. I think a lot of people fear success. They fear being successful. And then therefore that then creates a barrier. Because there's lots of people who's got the ability to do marvelous things, achieve marvelous things, but yet they don't. And I think sometimes that's tied up with the fear of being successful.
And what would you say they were afraid of if they did get successful? What kind of things do you think might be coming up there?
Maybe they're just a fear that they will draw attention to themselves. I don't know. That the spotlight will be on them and therefore they would attract more criticism.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yep.
I like that.
Frank, in that, I don't know what you call it, when you wrote the word create and you put several things beside each letter, you said transcend your fears.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
And I pointed to this in the piece about minds do what minds do. So there's something, sometimes our intuitive response to something the mind is doing that's not serving us is to try and fight it, to resist it. Because we believe if we resist the mind, it will change. But actually, the mind is doing what it's programmed to do. The idea of transcending starts with what Claudette was talking about. I am not my mind. This is my mind trying to protect me. But I, who am aware of the mind, know that I'm okay. I don't need protection. So you let it blow. It will pass. So transcendence has to do with looking above it and saying, oh, it's confused. It will pass. It will come to a place where it recognizes or just flow like a wave and go. And I'll be back centered in myself, who I really am, and my okayness. And that is a more effective way, because when you resist the mind, you actually give it more energy. You keep it in the room. And what happens is that then it seizes you and begins to take you around a loop. But by recognizing, oh, it's okay, it's just my mind doing that, it'll blow over. Once it's blown over, you reconnect to your center, and then you're able to actually, and I do help people and say, just be conscious of your breathing alone will return you to the present moment. Because very often when the mind is afraid or doing things, it's either projecting into the future or fixating on the past. So by resetting yourself to the present moment, by being conscious of your breath, you're able to connect to what's here now. What's the truth of here right now? And then you get another inspiration of what to do, whether sit down, rest, walk, do something else, and that sort of thing. So does that help, Mira?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking the question. Anything else on that before we put anything else in there?
I think that there are some. Well, there is a theme in the poem, and it's like the Martin Luther famous speech where it goes back to the I have a dream. It's going back to the major theme, and I think the major theme is so accurate here, because in the conversation about success, it speaks about touching a reality. It speaks about opening that which is internal, the heart. It speaks about going deep within. It speaks about the process and not an end state. And so I think that the theme there is understanding that success is not that which is extrinsic. It's not external. It's intrinsic. It's an internal awakening to a whole new reality and a beingness, if you want to call it that. And you use an interesting word in this, because in order for that experience to be born, the word you use there, what is required is to decide. And to decide speaks of the necessity of being conscious and not just on automatic mode, to be present. And when I was thinking about this, I read the poem a couple of times over. Another one that I really, really love, this poem, because to decide literally means de, which is Latin for cut, and side in Latin means off. So it literally means to cut off all other options, and to be attentional and intentional as it relates to the inner workings, what's going on the inside. And that is the power of really defining what success feels like, looks like, and is experienced. It's eternal.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks a lot for that. Yeah, And it goes back to something you were saying earlier about this idea of what if it's not about an end destination? What is it about the process of the journey itself? And again, that kind of definition of success points to that. So this piece is called Fearless. So again, it brings us back to the theme of fear, and we're just kind of tying everything up here. Fearlessness is not overcoming fear like a fight or war. It is not being afraid of fear either and insisting that it disappear. It's about knowing its true nature, appreciating its true intentions, acknowledging genuine concerns, holding love closer than it, while taking the very next step, fearing no less while staying true to serving what is flowing from you. I'll read it again. Fearlessness is not overcoming fear like a fight or war. It is not being afraid of fear either and insisting that it disappear. It's about knowing its true nature, appreciating its true intentions, acknowledging genuine concerns, holding love closer than it, while taking the very next step, fearing no less while staying true to serving what is flowing from you. What's coming up for people in this one? By the way, this is not about agreement. If you don't agree with something, then say so as well. Okay. All of it starts conversations, right?
I like the verse, holding love closer than it. That appealed to me.
Tell me more about that.
Well, perfect love casts out all fear. So I'm just thinking the more that we learn to love and understand other people, I think we'll learn to see where they're at and not fear so much maybe for them.
There is that. And there is that knowing that you are loved as well. And that love is able to hold you and keep you above any concerns that there may be. Yeah, thanks for that, Mira. Anybody else?
I think each of them sort of flow into the other, and there's some common threads that flows through all of these poems. And it's about what kind of mindset does someone have or need to have to be able to see accurately, or your worldview, the prism through which you see things. And fearlessness, it's not taking away or diminishing the reality that fear exists, but how am I going to view it? You know, I've been given the power of love as my weapon, you know, to be able to stand in the face of fear. So, yeah.
Thank you.
What came to me is this. Again, and this confirms what you said earlier, Frank. Because if we conjure up this picture of being at the beach or in a pool with a beach ball, right? I don't know if anyone has ever been in a pool or at the beach with a beach ball, and you push the ball under the water and it comes back, comes up. And the more energy you exert to push it, it uses that same energy to come back up, right? And it's the same idea with thought suppression doesn't work. And fear in itself, as the poem says, fighting it to overcome it, it uses your own energy and focus to come back even more.
I like that. Really.
Because the thought suppression just doesn't work. And so, as the poem is saying, where instead of, because there's a saying that says, what you resist persists, right? And in science, there's a particle, I was watching this thing recently, some of the world leaders were having some crazy conversations. And there's a particle in science, I think it's a dark matter, and they just gave it the name because they don't know what it is. But apparently the entire universe is made up of this substance, right? And when the substance is not observed, it doesn't exist. But the moment there's observation, it comes to life, right? And which is just, to me, mind-boggling. But it speaks to the point where, in this conversation again, fear, fearlessness, and all those dynamics, I think for us, it's what's helpful is if, yes, there's a separation, seeing versus being, but the being in terms of our beingness, if when we're entering the conversation about fear, we do not enter the conversation from a deficit being, but we enter the conversation being able to answer the question, what if I had no fear of death? If I had no fear of not being good enough, if I had no fear of not having enough money and all these things, how then would I enter this conversation? And then enter the dialogue with fear, not from a deficit place, but from a place of abundance. I'm already loved. I'm already accepted. I'm already celebrated. I'm already so on and so on. And then from that truth of our beingness, we look at fear.
Yeah, that's beautiful, because that goes back to exactly what Mira was saying. That everything you've said there, love answers those. If you are in a place of being completely loved and accepted, it gives you the ability to say, regardless of what fear is saying, this is coming from me. I'm going to honor it and take this next step to do what I'm inspired to do. And creativity and creating comes from a place of inspiration. Where you are the conduit. We covered this in the session. I think Anne-Marie was in that session as well. We were talking about us being the conduit. How does creativity flow when we're not the source of it and we're not trying to control it, but the conduits of it? So again, if the inspiration is there, then that's almost that's the power, that's the love, that's the everything we need to take that next step. If we don't allow what our mind is telling us to stop us. But at the same time, if we don't waste a lot of energy trying to say our mind shouldn't be doing that, or our mind shouldn't be doing that, or we want to stop our mind from doing that, because we don't have power over all those things. We have the power to observe the mind. We have the power not to go along with what it's going up with, and to continue in faith and love doing what we know to do. And that is pretty much the invitation.
But if I may quickly, Frank, because when you touch on creativity, this is fear is such the Bible says it's torment, right? The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Fear steals, fear kills, and fear destroys. And the neuroscientists will tell you that it's not just spiritual heebie-jeebie. It's tested and proven that when we have a fear thought, what literally happens in the mind is that over 100 billion brain cells, and each cell have that synaptic gap in between them. When it's a fearful thought, the chemical that's released is called cortisone. It's a stress chemical. And cortisone is an abductor. And what it means is it blocks the brain cells from connecting. And when that happens, basically what happens is there's no longer the freedom of thought. Thought can't travel. When thought can't travel, we can't come up with creative solutions. We can't come up with ideas. We can't come up with answers. So it literally has a physiological, a chemical, and a biological impact on us.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that then loops back to this idea we said about safety. So just for the sake of everybody else as well, the idea then is when fear kicks in because it thinks there's danger, its job now is to arrest your resources for survival.
Yeah.
It then considers things like creativity and your mind roaming around and finding good solution and things like that a luxury. So what it does is go, no, we're now in survival mode. So all your resources need to be, how do we fight, flee, whatever else is going to happen, feign or whatever. So backing up what Ryan was saying there is that when you're in a fear state and you allow yourself to be gripped by this fear state and you really begin to feed this fear state, your resources are not fully available to be creative in that space. Wow. Okay, I can't believe we're we're here already. So just from each person then, what is one significant thing you're taking away from today? Start with Claudette.
How the mind plays tricks, and just to continue to sit quietly and observe. That's what I'm taking from today.
Thank you. Muriel?
When Ryan was talking about the beach ball, it came to my mind as saying I once heard that one of us can make a drop, but all of us together can make an ocean. And I think all of you today have given me oceans to think about. So I'm going to head for whatever I have to head for today. Hopefully successfully.
Well, great. Yeah, you're welcome. And we've enjoyed your wisdom as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Ryan?
The beauty of collective wisdom that's in the room, and the truth of being made so much richer for being here with everyone today.
All right, thank you. Anne-Marie?
The notion that it all begins and ends with us individually and collectively, and the way we view things. We have the power, whether we view things in a negative light or positive light.
Thank you very much for that. And to add to that from myself is this idea that for us to know that we're empowered to look at what our mind is doing and understand when it's serving us and when it's not serving us, and to understand that we have the agency to be able to not go along with the ride and let it blow over, and then just reconnect with our center, and then come from a place of being empowered rather than being hampered by fear. Well, thank you very much, everyone. You've helped make this a wonderful session. Whatever you're doing with the rest of